against the Syrian government is an unacceptable provocation. Let me wind this back for you. The White House earlier claimed today that the Assad leadership is preparing to launch a chemical weapons attack in Syria. President Trump's press secretary says the US will take action if that happened.
The United States has identified potential preparations for another chemical weapons attack by the Assad regime. The United States is in Syria to eliminate the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. If, however, Mr. Assad conducts another mass murder attack using chemical weapons, he and his military will pay a heavy price.
Following on from that, Britain's Defence Secretary is pledging the UK's support for any US action to prevent another chemical attack in Syria. But Michael Fallon then went on to admit that he hadn't actually seen the intelligence that Washington was basing its allegations on. RT's Paul Sleer has more.
They say that they've detected potential preparations that would likely result in mass civilian casualties. They talk about the mass murder of innocent children. Now, certainly, in order to be able to sell a message as serious as this, you need that kind of emotional pitch that talks about innocent children being killed. The statement also references potential preparations, but it doesn't give any kind of details as to what those potential preparations involve. So what does it mean, other than that it is similar to what the US detected before the last chemical attack back in April? The statement also says that any chemical attack in Syria in the immediate future will be blamed on Assad and his allies. Now, this is without any kind of investigation, without any kind of due process, just punishment. It's worth looking at the timing of the statement as well. Assad and his army are making major gains inside the country, especially against terrorist groups such as Islamic State.
Well, the US allegations come despite Moscow's latest call for Washington to stay clear of provocations in Syria. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov made that comment in a phone conversation with his US counterpart. That call apparently was initiated by Washington and was the first time the diplomats had spoken almost face-to-face, if I can put it that way, since the downing of a Syrian military jet by the US more than a week ago. The two apparently discussed the need to consolidate the ceasefire in Syria, as well as suppressing attempts to use chemical weapons by any party in that conflict. And as mentioned, Mr. Lavrov stressed that the US avoids provocations like shooting down Syrian aircraft. Let's go live to International Affairs Professor Sriram Chalia, get his thoughts on what might be happening here. Hi, nice to see you. So the White House claiming it has got intelligence pointing to a planned chemical attack by the Syrian government. The UK has not seen it, must be said. What would Damascus possibly gain by carrying out an attack like that on its own soil? Again, we've asked this question so many times over the same allegations that have come out over the years. But again, it's very valid. Why would it do it?
It beats me, Kevin. I think, intelligence, the so-called intelligence that the Americans often put out as a pretext for taking military action, has often been politicized and is not necessarily very accurate. I don't think they have access to the inside of the Syrian regime to determine, to find out what they're determining in terms of where they will attack and what means they will use. I am more concerned of this as being part of this turf war that's going on, wherein, the Americans since the Trump administration has come in, has sided more and more with Saudi Arabia, and they want to put the Assad regime under extreme pressure and possibly bring about its downfall. After the Shayrat airbase was attacked in April, again, after an alleged chemical attack, it was said that this was going to be a one-off thing and it would not be repeated. But since then, the trends have not been encouraging. The US policy is becoming more and more dangerous. They have brought down a Syrian aircraft recently. They have been shooting down Iranian-made Syrian drones that are keeping an eye on ISIS. They claim that they have a so-called Syrian democratic force on the ground and that they will not yield an inch to Iran or Syrian government forces or militias backed by them. And so what we are seeing is, in the pretext of chemical weapons and warning the Syrian government, what they are saying is essentially stay away from our areas. And they want to carve out basically a statelet of their own. Basically, Saudi Arabia's ultimate goal is to break up Syria and to have a Sunni state that is dominated either by ISIS or by some form of Sunni government that is amenable to Saudi Arabia's diktats. So in the name of chemical weapons, what is going on is this, they're staking out territory, telling the Syrians and the Russians and the Iranians, stay out of our zone, and if you come in, then we will use chemical weapons pretext and bomb you. So I think this is a very clear game plan, and what we are seeing is not good because it means de facto division of Syria and also encouragement for ISIS that relies on the disunity of all the different factions in Syria.
You use the word pretext there. That's the worry, isn't it? And there's a saying goes that if you say something enough, mud sticks. Russian officials have been calling out the US for failing to investigate, they say properly, that previous chemical incident in Syria back in April, the one you were talking about there. The worry is it doesn't look like it's going to need much for the US to use it as an excuse if it decides to bomb the Syrian government forces again for something it's not even planning on doing. Again, a pretext, and the more it's said, maybe the US will think the more it's going to be believed.
Well, no, I don't think the people of the world can believe this because the Americans themselves have been named by the United Nations that their aerial bombardment has caused massive civilian deaths and displacement in and around Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor, as well as in Iraq around Mosul. So right now, it's like the case of the pot calling the kettle black, because you have a situation where the Western coalition forces are causing maximum human rights abuses on the ground by indiscriminate aerial bombardment. Hundreds have already been killed and possibly thousands. So we have a situation where they are talking about babies being gassed, and on the other hand, their aerial bombardment has been so indiscriminate. And if you spread the net wider, it's not just in Syria and Iraq. Their ally Saudi Arabia is doing the same in Yemen. So if you count up all of those, the atrocities are very severe on that side too. So for them to now say, we will come and police you and stop you from using chemical weapons, it's so ironic because there was in fact reports of them using banned chemical substances in their aerial warfare themselves. So I think the Western coalition simply using chemical weapons as a pretext, as I said before, as an alibi to try and push the Syrian state from regaining control over ISIS-controlled territory.
It's such a complicated picture and not all at all what it seems to be on the surface, behind the scenes, as you say. And Sriram Chalia, International Affairs Professor, thanks for giving us your thoughts on the latest update. Month G20 summit in Germany. Then the country's foreign ministry has warned the Turkish president not to bring his bodyguards there. Miguel Francis Santiago looks at why that might be.
President Erdogan is planning to appear in Germany next month for the annual G20 summit, and it looks like the red carpet won't be rolled out for the Turkish leader. Apparently, the incident with his security detail during his recent Washington visit has put EU officials on alert, saying, please don't bring your bodyguards.
I have reason to expect that these people who have been incriminated by the American criminal justice system will not step onto German soil in the foreseeable future, including during the G20 summit.
And another no-no on the list for President Erdogan, rallies. Major venues so far have declined to host the Turkish leader. The reasons were quite interesting and ranged from renovations to, sorry, already booked. Imagine the US president coming to Germany and failing to find a place to appear. Not very likely. But then again, should we be surprised? Tensions between Germany and Turkey have been building up for months now, starting with Germany pulling its military from Turkey's Incirlik air base and sending it to Jordan after Ankara denied German officials a visit to the base. On the other hand, you've got Turkey angry with Germany for granting asylum to Turkish citizens who allegedly took part in the failed coup 2016. And of course, Berlin also stepped in to stop Turkish rallies in Germany to support Erdogan's push for broader powers in a referendum back in April.
Germany, you have no notion of democracy. Your practices are no different from the Nazi practices of the past.
My comment that the Nazi comparisons in Turkey's part must end is valid, without ifs or buts. Unfortunately, we see that these comparisons haven't stopped, and we are not going to allow it.
They would revive gas chambers and concentration camps if they weren't ashamed. This is their mentality. They are disturbed when we say that this is Nazi mentality.
Well, it's no easy task piecing back together relations that have completely fallen apart. One side will have to likely admit its mistakes. And at this point, it doesn't look like Germany or Turkey are ready to do that. Miguel Francis Santiago, RT.
Got expert opinion on where German-Turkish relations stand at the moment.
When Erdogan visited Washington, D.C. some weeks ago, exactly these lifeguards misbehaved badly. And this is exactly what Germany doesn't want to see on its own territory.
Okay, in Turkey we have some, mistakes related to democracy and some shortages, but they should help us to improve it better than to, to push Turkey towards the east.
If you look to the German politics towards Turkey over the last years, in Germany has accepted every impoliteness and every humiliation of the Turkish side. And this has gone too far. And now Germany tries to set limits.
The Europeans are champions of democracy and human rights when we speak about the Middle East. But when we speak about the democracy and human rights and Muslim rights in Europe, there are, some kind of double standards and hypocrisy.
As Turkey isn't the strongest economy in the world and isn't the strongest military power, I guess that both Europe and the US have now the duty to react in a proper way and to say to Turkey, we want to be partner of you, but accept the rules. And if you don't accept the rules, you have to accept that we are a little bit harder than we used to be.
Elections are coming in Germany, and they try to use, this some kind of Islamophobia or Turkophobia or xenophobia. That is very famous or notorious in Germany, these kind of things. And they started again. I think it will carry on up to the next elections in Germany in the end of, I think, autumn. And then the relations will be normal after that.
Russia's
applause for the British Prime Minister's solution to propping up her weak government. Theresa May is spending an extra £1 billion on Northern Ireland in order to get the province's Democratic Unionist Party to support her in Parliament. Anastasia Churkina reports on how it might not be the damage control Mrs May's hoping it'll be.
Are you resigning, Prime Minister? You're stepping down, Mrs May. May must go! May must go! May must go!
Instead of stepping down, the British Prime Minister had a different plan. But it seemed like whichever way she turned, there was potential for trouble. The Tories have penned a deal with the Democratic Unionist Party of Northern Ireland, which is opposed to a hard Brexit, something May has accepted as a possibility. On top of that, the DUP have been criticized for their policies on same-sex marriage and abortion, as well as previous links with violent paramilitary groups in Northern Ireland. Not a perfect ally, but the 10 DUP MPs have been crucial for Theresa May. So much so, she was ready to pay. Their support came with a hefty price tag of £1 billion to be spent over the next 2 years. That's in addition to the previously announced $500 million in funds to Northern Ireland. And who is footing the bill, you may ask? As always, the taxpayer.
Taxpayers resent politicians cooking up deals behind closed doors that invariably end with their cash being thrown wherever is politically advantageous, rather than where it could be best spent.
Theresa May called it a good deal, and the DUP are delighted. If you think the same applies to Scotland and Wales, think again.
This is the worst kind of pork barrel politics, which has shredded the last vestiges of credibility of this weakened Prime Minister.
It is outrageous that the Prime Minister believes she can secure her own political future by throwing money at Northern Ireland whilst completely ignoring the rest of the UK.
Despite the British government having now plastered together a solution, the question is, for how long will it stick? After all, the irony is that a mere 7 Tory MPs switching sides would potentially be enough for a majority to slip away. Anastasia Churkina, RT, London.